This is Alexandre O, Philippe, a jury member this year, and it is your 6th time at Filmfest Munich, right? Is it because we were debating about it, right?
It's 5th or 6th. I can't quite remember.
Way too many times. We can't really
recall. Count that many times.
Shall we sit down?
Yes, of course.
Alexandre O, Philippe. I'm so happy that you made it back to the festival and that you agreed to be on our Cinevision jury this year. I want to talk about your jury habits and what you kind of discussed. We can't really talk about the films just yet, but I want to still talk about it how it was, because I love to talk about your vision of film and filmmakers, because I guess that's also what all of your movies are in a way about. We called this panel Deconstructing the Masters. Would you agree with that title, that you do actually deconstruct the masters?
I certainly deconstruct film in very sort of obsessive ways, and I guess, yes, of course, by extension, I deconstruct the masters. I've spent obviously quite a bit of time with William Friedkin. Speaking of masters, spent really a couple of years working very closely with him and sort of getting my own personal masterclass, if you will, which is kind of a thrill, when you're a film geek, to get to spend that much time and just pick his brain and ask all the questions you want to ask. In fact, we just announced in the trades now that literally 30 minutes ago, I didn't even have a chance to tell you, but we are making a film on William Shatner. And it's all over the trades right now. We are finally announcing the project. And so I got to spend quite a bit of time with him as well. He's 91 years old, and just very, very interesting person to deconstruct, as well. So
I'm very happy that you're telling me here on stage, because now I can tell you, give us the title for our next festival already and commit to us. No, I'm just kidding, but I'm super happy that it's happening, right? And that being said, you are shooting so many films.
Yes.
It's how do you keep going? Because we are showing The Taking, the German premiere of The Taking.
Right.
You just showed your most recent film about Lynch at Tribeca Film Festival, and now you're working on Shatner. It's how do you do it?
Well, I'm working on Shatner, I'm working on a film on Vertigo, I'm working on a short for Criterion, and there's probably some other projects that may be happening. So yeah, it just sort of keeps me going, and I have a lot of festival travels coming up. I travel a lot, all the time, but I actually work quite well when I travel. My team, I've been working with the same people for about 15 years, save for a couple of people that sort of joined the team in the later stages. But so we have a shorthand, and the fact that I'm on different time zones means that when I'm sleeping, they're working, and when they're sleeping, I'm working. So it works quite well, actually, yeah.
Just keep it going 24/7.
Yeah.
We were just talking about what's happening now or what's about to happen, but I would love to go back to what you said at the very beginning, obsession. Because it's how did your obsession with film and the art of filmmaking start?
Well, it's funny because I've been thinking about this a lot, and in fact, the film I'm working on right now on Vertigo is going to sort of go to the roots of my obsession with film and sort of the roots of my cinephilia. I think film as long as I can remember has always been a part of my life. I have these very strong memories of watching Hitchcock, of watching Columbo, of watching some more sort of obscure horror movies as well. I was way into horror when I was a kid. That certainly has not changed. Very much into that genre. But yeah, I think I was exposed to a lot of great movies when I was very, very young, and it just was the thing that I would do, So yeah, I'm just a cinephile, and I think I'm a cinephile first, and kind of student of film, second, and filmmaker, probably third. But I'm very lucky in a way that my filmmaking is linked to this sort of obsession for trying to look at film in a different way. I'm very interested in these films that become cultural events, that become cultural moments. Obviously the shower scene. I've made a film on Alien. I've made a film on The Exorcist. I made a film on Star Wars. Lynch now, and the Wizard of Oz, and there's, to me, when a film or a scene or a moment, an image, becomes ubiquitous in culture, it's very important, I think, to ask ourselves why. Why is this happening? Why Psycho and not Peeping Tom, right? That's actually a very interesting sort of particular specific case study to look at these two films, which came out basically at the same time. And because if we try to understand, that, then I think, films really hold a mirror to who we are. And I think those are not just movies. They're much more than just movies. And that's why they become classics,
They're a bit of like cultural identity or identities in a way, and it's so great that you're just touched upon that subject in a way, because that's the perfect link to The Taking.
Right.
Right? Because in The Taking, you're not focusing on a specific filmmaker or a specific film, but sort of like a valley, monumental valley, that became sort of like a picture and an identity itself, and you try to deconstruct that valley. So maybe without telling too much, because we're gonna celebrate the premiere in an hour and a half from now, it's like, how did you come up with that idea, and what was it that sort of like interested you in that specific valley?
So when I live in the United States now, I have for a while, and but I grew up in Switzerland, and growing up, watching movies, growing up as a cinephile, Westerns were definitely a genre of huge interest. I've always loved Westerns. I have this very distinct memory of watching, of course, John Wayne dubbed in French, which is kind of weird. I'm sure it's probably equally weird dubbed in German. I don't know, but
it is.
It is, yeah. And so before I went to America, and before I, obviously long before I became a filmmaker, I had this idea of America, and this real sort of desire to go and explore and discover the American West. And thinking about that, the image, the shapes of Monument Valley just kept coming to mind. And, and it's interesting because why, right? Well, that's movies. That's the power of movies. It's those images that you've seen on your small screen in Switzerland evoke somehow America. And, then what I found is that, this is not only my experience, that many people in Europe, around the world, in fact, that the images of Monument Valley evoke something, and it's almost like a trigger, right? It's what we call semiotics. And so, in my sort of constant research about film, I became very interested in this idea, because obviously many of my films are about memory, they're about images, they're about the power of cinema on our brains. I became very interested to know why this happened. And it starts really with John Ford. What's really quite interesting and quite unique is that John Ford made or shot 7 films at Monument Valley. This is very sort of unique in the history of movies. But it's the fact that each of these films has a very distinct narrative, using different locations, different Native American tribes, and therefore completely warping the reality of American history. And so, this to me had to be the angle. It's like I want to look very specifically at the way that Monument Valley has been and continues to be shown in film, in the media, in advertising, and what is that image of an image of an image, and what does that project? And it's actually quite damaging to the Navajo people, and it has been damaging for a very, very long time. And so it's this sort of dance in a way, because there's a real function to myth, and what we get from myth. But when myth becomes quote unquote fact, and when we buy that as fact, and when certain people are being when it becomes really truly problematic, then what do you make of that? So there's that, there's John Ford, the filmmaker, whom of course I greatly admire. There's the legacy of John Ford's Westerns at Monument Valley, which is extremely problematic, that I think needs to be looked at as well.
And it's really interesting, without taking, once again, too much away from the movie just yet, it's like you're still using the myth in your film, and you're playing with it as well. So maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit as well, and how you went for that specific playfulness in a way.
Yeah, I mean the first again, without giving it away, the first 10 minutes of the film is very much sort of plays into the hands of people who buy into the myth. It's all about the myth of the West, and then about 10 minutes in, we sort of pull the rug from other people's feet and start. It really takes a 180 into a very different kind of story and different kind of narrative. But it's the way that I worked with my interviewees. It was a movie that came out of the pandemic, in the sense that there were no actual interviews, no filmed interviews. Everything was done remotely. So all the interviewees in the film are essentially a chorus of voices, and I interviewed them. Obviously, they were in a recording studio. I was recording them over the phone. But one of the things that I did was I extracted every single shot of the monuments in every single John Ford film, so that I would have essentially these sort of like diagrams where you can see very quickly, almost like a bird's eye view, this is the way John Ford uses Monument Valley in Stagecoach. This is the way he uses it in, She Wore a Yellow Ribbon. This is the way he uses it in the Searchers, and so on and so forth. And so I would put those in front of my interviewees or send it to them and say, when you look at it, I don't want you to think about it. I don't want you to think about, forget about your expertise, forget about your political beliefs, forget about everything. Just visually, what do you see? How is he using the monuments? How is he using the monuments in relationship to the characters? How is he using the lighting? How is he framing them? What do you see? And I love that process, because that's, it's something quite similar to what I did with my film on the psycho shower scene, where the second part of the interview, I actually put each interviewee in control of the shower scene. So I gave them a laptop. They were sort of watching it. They could fast forward, they could pause, they could go back, they could do whatever they wanted. But at that point, I wanted them to tell me what they saw, if they wanted to comment on a particular cut, on a particular shot, whatever it was. And what's remarkable about this is when you're talking to the masters, when you're talking to people who know so much about movies, who thinks so much about movies, every single one is unique. Every single person will tell you something that you have not thought of, something completely different. I mean, I could be making films about the shower scene for the rest of my life, and I would never get bored. I guarantee you. In fact, I'm going to do another one at some point.
You are?
Yeah.
Oh.
No, it's.
I'm going to be excited about that one.
Yeah, it'll be very, very different, but we're plotting it. Yeah.
I was just going to ask you, because that's the right fit, because you're referring to the shower scene, and I feel like with the Monument Valley, you did the same thing, as in like those scenes or the valley, they become a character, and they become sort of like a person in a way,
Yeah.
Maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's it's such an incredible place. I mean, it's very difficult for me to say this too, because again, you can't go to Monument Valley and pretend to unsee the films that you've seen when you were whatever, young or even as an adult. I mean, those films carry so much mythology, so much resonance. I mean, the power of film, in this day and age, there is so much media. We get bombarded by so much stuff. We have companies now calling movies, and I hate this word, content, right? Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, all these companies, it's all content. I think it's a slippery slope. Because if we treat everything the same way, all these images, and we don't even think about what we're ingesting, then it's very easy to get manipulated by images. I mean, now we're getting into the age of deep fakes as well. That's a whole other thing. So the power of film is there at that place. You cannot escape it. That said, the place itself, is incredibly. I mean, there's a reason why John Ford shot 7 films there, right? There's a reason why we're still shooting westerns there. It's so incredibly beautiful and overwhelming that even though you cannot disassociate yourself from the cinematic past of Monument Valley, the place itself is absolutely incredible and gorgeous and very much a character. I mean, those monuments are, and in fact, John Ford uses them in this way. He uses them as individuals. They're connected to certain characters in some of his films, They're incredible.
Mm-hmm. Let's jump a little to how you conduct your interviews, because you were talking about it, that it was very, very different for The Taking, but I would love to talk about your film about William Friedkin, Leap of Faith, because when I saw it at Sundance a couple of years ago, it was in 2020?
2020, yeah.
I remember just like the things that you got out of him. I was just so awestruck by it, and I would love to hear like how you go about that, because you just said that everyone tells you different stories and that you just love how they all have very different perspectives and show their identities and their personalities. So how do you do it?
Well, I mean, every film's different, and certainly this one was very different in the sense that this was the first film that I made about one person. Which is what obviously I just, I'm working on right now with William Shatner, even though it's going to be a completely different kind of film. So basically, Leap of Faith was, I will say, it was Friedkin's idea. We met at the Sitges Film Festival, and he invited me to his table. He had heard a lot about 1752. He asked me to send it to him immediately. I did. And then he, 2 hours later, sent me this email. He said, I want to buy you lunch in LA next time you're in LA. And I'm like, okay. So 3 weeks later, I'm having lunch with Friedkin in LA. And then the conversation shifted towards The Exorcist very quickly. And, he started telling me about his archive and things that people have never seen. And then he said, very sort of casually, he said, well, if you wanted access, I'd give you access. I'm like, okay.
That was too easy.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's like, okay, that's the biggest bait I've ever been given, and I'm going to take it. And so I'm like, okay, well, what do I said, like, fine. He said, well, just read my autobiography, and then if you find an angle, just let me know. Okay. So next thing I do is I go to Barnes & Noble and I pick up the book and, of course, immediately read it. And and what came to me was, what was, I think, obvious that needed to be done, was because there had been, obviously, a couple of films made about The Exorcist, about, the making of the film. I don't really make making of films, but there are making of elements in my films, but they're never about the making of. But, there were some really good making of films made. Mark Kermode's film is great. But there's a lot about the special effects and all this stuff. I was really interested in trying to see The Exorcist through Friedkin's perspective, but as someone who's interested in art, in classic movies, in music. And so I told him, I said, I would like to approach The Exorcist kind of like the way that Truffaut did with Hitchcock, over a period of days. And we're going to crack this thing open, scene by scene, shot by shot, moment by moment, and I'm going to need a few days. Is that okay? And he said, yep, this sounds, ambitious and wonderful. How many days do you need? So
again, too easy.
Too easy, right? Well, I mean, it was easy for me, so it had to be. It goes both ways, right? So we started with 4 days, and then there was a fifth, and then eventually there was a sixth. So the result is 6 days of interviews, with, of course, many, conversations, lunches, coffees, whatever in between. Which is, has been really quite surreal. I mean, there's so many I have so many stories, of like driving in the American desert, and Friedkin calls me, and I've got one bar, and I have to stop. And then he tells me all these stories about Iraq, and I'm like, damn, why am I not filming this? Why are you telling me this now on the phone in the American desert? It's just these incredible sort of memories of doing it. But the way that I prepared for it, because this was so different, is I picked an idyllic spot to counterbalance the intensity and the horror of the film. I went to a vineyard in Sebastopol, California, which is wine country. And so I got this Airbnb with this beautiful view of this vineyard. And I took The Exorcist with me. And for a month, my routine was the exact same every single day. I would wake up at 5:30 in the morning. I would drive in the fog, drive by the Potter School, where, of course, The Birds was filmed. So pay my respects to Hitch. And then go to the beach, go for a long hour-and-a-half walk. Go and get my coffee, get back to the Airbnb, and now the sun's up, and I'm seeing this vineyard. Watch The Exorcist, and then start just writing and taking notes for the rest of the day on what I've seen. And every single time, of course, some new stuff started coming up, and I started organizing my interview, my interview sessions into themes, and sort of giving the film really kind of a structure, and figuring out essentially, how I was going, how each day was going to sort of unfold. For instance, we spent, the entire first day was dedicated to the opening sequence, the Iraq sequence, and we could have probably talked. I think we didn't quite finish on the first day, so I think we went another hour or so on the second day, and kept going, because there's so much to unpack there. There's so much about tone and mood, and what is narrative, and there's a lot to unpack really in that opening sequence, and so that's the way that I approached it. And because we got to spend so much time, and because there was a real sort of emotional connection, I think on day 4, out of the blue, we were on a short break, and he said, "Did I tell you about Kyoto?" He said, "The Kyoto Zen Gardens." I'm like, "No." He said, "Okay, let's roll." Okay. So we're rolling cameras, and I imagine most people here probably haven't seen the film, but I'm certainly not going to spoil it. But I will say this: he started talking about his experience 30 years ago at the Kyoto Zen Gardens, which he still thinks about every day, and started crying. This is William Friedkin in front of me talking about the Kyoto Zen Gardens, crying, and I'm like, just completely bowled over. And the moment was so powerful, it was so emotional, it was so completely unexpected that two thoughts immediately came to mind. The first one is, this is the ending of the film, because it connects on so many levels. And then secondly, shit, we have to go to Kyoto. And we had not budgeted for Kyoto. And but we found a way, and we found a way, and we went there April 2020, during cherry blossoms. And I saw, it was really special to be able to sort of experience what he was talking about. And I felt that going into Kyoto and out of Kyoto, when I was on the bullet train back to Tokyo, I thought this was like, I've been in a dream for like 4 days. It was sort of being in Friedkin's dream, in a way, but it was, I have this memory now of Kyoto, which is, that place is not real. It's unbelievable. I think the town itself has, I don't know how many, I think it's 1,300 Buddhist temples in Kyoto alone. And these, we went to like 5 or 6, and they're all just more, each one is just more incredible. Oh, and there's this moment, I have to tell you about this moment, because that was wild. So we went to this, it was a remote Buddhist temple, and they had these incredible sort of stone statues everywhere. And we talked to the guy at the gate, and we were hiding because the cameras are quite big. And we said, we want to film something, and the guy gave permission. And then when our PA gave us a signal, we just went in with our cameras, and we started filming, right? And then about 30 minutes later, this Buddhist monk starts coming towards us, and we're like, shit, he's going to tell us to stop. And he comes up to us, and he says, what are you doing? He says, well, we're filming. What are you filming? Well, it's a documentary about, William Friedkin and The Exorcist. And okay. And he lets us do our thing, and then he just goes back. We finish filming, we go, and he's right there at the gate, and we're like, what is he going to say now? And he gives me an envelope, and he says, I'm a musician. The Exorcist is my favorite film. Could you please give this to Mr. Friedkin for me? And this is where you realize, like, the impact of that film. Anywhere around the world, people know it. It's a film that obviously doesn't leave people indifferent. But to be filming at, there and get that kind of a reaction was pretty special.
Mm-hmm. Would you really consider yourself a documentary filmmaker, though? No. I figured you wouldn't. Like, how would you describe your films yourself? Because I would like to call you sort of like the king of the meta film, in a way, because that's what they essentially are. Yeah. But they are still documentaries.
They're films about film.
Yeah.
I've never liked the word documentary. I think there's a stigma still to that. I think, rightly or wrongly, because there's obviously some amazing documentary filmmakers, working in the form. But I think there is still that stigma about that, this, if it's a documentary, it's, you're going to be lectured at, you're going to learn something, you're going to be told things, and it's not necessarily seen, I think, as a cinematic experience. For me, the films that I make have to be cinematic. And if it's not, because I'm still, I watch a lot more fiction films than I watch documentaries. And again, I'm not bashing documentaries. I love great docs, right? But but for me, the great documentaries they're movies. There's no distinction. It's not, who cares if it's fiction or nonfiction? And
you did go to New York University, and you have a degree in creative writing, right? Or dramatic writing.
Yeah.
So does that come into play here as well? Because your films do have a certain poeticism and poetics to them.
Sure.
So
no, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think I came into doing what I'm doing, as a cinephile, as a dramatic writer, and as someone who's interested in providing a cinematic experience. And so, to me, like, 1752, which is the film I did about the shower scene from Psycho, that's completely different than reading a 500-page, scholarly book about the shower scene, which is going to be wonderful. I mean, it's, but the thing that bugs me about film studies in a way is that I think there is a perception, rightly, I think, from the general public that this stuff is so stuffy, it's so over one's head or whatever, that it's really intense. And some of it is very, very important, but not everybody who loves film is going to want to read these massive books deconstructing film in ways that are just so intensely intellectual. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's about the emotional experience. It's about, I see my films, I think, as a way to sort of create a bridge between the general public and film studies. This idea that if you're interested in film and you like to geek out about movies, that, come watch my movies and you'll see that this is then something that you can actually do by yourself and have fun with. Because if we don't have fun doing this, then I think we're probably in the wrong profession. I mean, film is really fun, is really engaging, and it's lovely, and it makes you think, and it makes you feel. I mean, it encompasses all of the arts. It encompasses all of the human emotions. I can be talking to people who I hugely respect, who have way more knowledge about film than me, and we can completely disagree about the same film we're watching. And that's really wonderful and fascinating, right? So to me, that's the thing. It's about providing a cinematic experience, because at the end of the day, I'm a filmmaker, and at the end of the day, I am asking people to lock themselves up in a dark theater, which is what every filmmaker asks, right? You're asking people to give you their money, go in a dark theater for 90 minutes, 2 hours, or God forbid, 3, 4, 7 hours. And you're basically, the contract is you're going to walk out of this dark theater and your expectations are going to be met, if not exceeded. I mean, that's a huge ask. And it's a very different ask than... So if you're going to a museum, I went yesterday to see that Polish exhibit at the Kunsthalle, which I highly recommend, by the way. These extraordinary forgotten artists from 1900 or so, 1890 to like 1918, Polish artists, mind-blowing stuff. But when you're going to a museum and you're going from painting to painting, or if you're going from painting to painting, you've paid your ticket. You don't have to stay 10 minutes in front of this one and then move on to the next one in 10 minutes, right? You can go where your heart feels like going. It's a very different experience. A book you can put down, you can digest, you can go for a walk, and then you can come back to it and keep going. Film, you're in it from beginning to end. So that's the contract. And I think, because if I were to make the film I wanted to make about the shower scene, it would have been a 3-hour movie. Okay, so there's gonna be a part 2. So that's why there has to be a part 2. Yeah, exactly. But it's like, but like I really felt, and I have these conversations with because I work with different editors, but I only work with editors who are very, would tell me like it is. If they feel like I'm getting a little too geeky, a little too, obsessive, then they're like, people are not gonna like this. And I listen, Sometimes I overrule, but I try really hard to make the films as lean as possible.
It's kind of funny that you say geeky a lot, because I put a comment on my card that says like, can I ask him, are you a film geek? And we all are, I guess.
Yeah, I mean...
That's why we're doing what we're doing.
That's right. Yeah, you're a film geek. I'm a film geek. Most people probably here. I mean, if you're here for this, you're probably a film geek. So
So shall we ask those geeks out there if they have any questions?
Right.
Are there questions? Yeah, there's one right here and then in the first row.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start in the front row.
You told us about your trip to Kyoto and you said it was in April 2020. How did you do this in the middle of the first wave of the pandemic?
Sorry, I meant 2019.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Good catch. Yeah. No, because we premiered in Venice 2019. I was thinking Sundance, but yeah. All right. So you're right. It was April 2019.
Someone is listening.
Yeah.
Another one is listening. I'm a film editor, and I wanted to talk about your relationship to the editor. Do you have a certain one? But you almost answered the question, but I'm interested in your relationship. Thanks.
Yeah, no, there's actually, there's 3 editors that I work with. And these days it's becoming quite important because I'm working on multiple projects. So it would not be possible without working with multiple editors. But they're all very different. And for me, it's a real sort of gut feeling that this project is good for this one. There's one, David Lawrence, who actually edited Leap of Faith. He edited Lynch Oz. He's going to edit the Vertigo film. He is a hugely geeky cinephile. And he is so perfectly right for those films because he will think of clips and ideas that I haven't thought of, And so I think he brings really something to those films. The films that are a little bit more poppy, like, William Shatner, that's a different editor. It's a different kind of dynamic, different approach to the film. I mean, there's, I think there's always going to be that sort of obsessiveness. But for me, it's really important to have an editor who, and the way that I work with the editor is like this, right? So unlike most documentary filmmakers, I actually write a script. And I tell my editor that, so for me, first, it has to work on the page. If it doesn't work on the page, it's not going to work on the screen, right? So when it works on the page, I'll give them the script and say, please just assemble it, because we're not really fully at the cutting stage yet, but assemble it in exactly like the script. And let's see what we like and what we don't like, right? So it's usually pretty fat at first, right? It's 2 hours instead of 90 minutes, but then we start really having a conversation about what works, what doesn't work, then I start layering in the visuals, and so it's a little bit of a back and forth. I mean, first he'll just kind of do this, just to sort of get it out of my system, and then we can really have a conversation, and then when we start really working on sequences, then I will let them kind of work their magic, because I know there are always, the reason I work with these people is because they have incredible ideas that I haven't thought of, right? I mean, that's rule number one of being a film director. You have to surround yourself with people who are way better than you are, so they make you look good. So I let them do their thing, and then they send it to me, and then and then of course I start getting really minute in my feedback. But so it's a little bit of being controlling and very clear, and then also giving them all the freedom that they need, and then a lot of conversation, and making sure that they're really honest in the pushback, and trying as much as I can to make sure. And I think my producer will agree that I do listen, and if I do, if a couple of people in my team, if my producer and my editor say, you really have to do this. I mean, we really strongly believe that this doesn't work. I'll think really hard about it. 90% of the time, they're right. 10% of the times, they're not. And I'll tell you the one instance that I can think of where they were wrong. It was so I made this film about Alien. It's a kind of a mythological take on Alien. It's called Memory. And the opening sequence is the craziest thing I've ever done. I mean, we shot it in Delphi, we shot it in Volterra in Italy, we shot parts of it in LA, and it's completely talk about sort of a non-narrative, sort of pure sort of like tonal exercise for the first, 4 minutes of the film. But it was really important to me. There was a real design behind it. My producer thought it wasn't working, and I held to my guts. I said, and my editor also was sort of fighting it. He's like, it's too long. I'm like, no, it's the way it should be. And then we got into Sundance, and so I was like, see, it works. But in all seriousness, I was still nervous about how people would respond to it. And I was absolutely convinced that every single screening during the entire tour, that the first question at the end of the Q&A would be, what's up with the opening sequence? Not a single person asked. And it took like 9 months into the tour for somebody to finally ask me a question about this. And I asked people after the film, and everybody was, oh yeah, it's amazing, it's great, it works. And in fact, to the point where at the Melbourne Film Festival, our sales agent had sent the DCP, and there was a glitch or whatever, because there's a few lines in ancient Greek subtitled, and the subtitles were gone. And I was fuming in the back. I was like, how are people going to get the film? Like, this is so crucial, whatever. And so after the film, during the Q&A, first thing I said is, I'm so sorry. There was supposed to be subtitles. These were the lines. And everybody was like, oh, that was great. We didn't need that. And like, wow, So that's the thing. You just never know. But that was really the one instance. Most of the time, like I said, they're right.
Shall we see if there are more questions? There's one back there. Yeah.
Yes, I thought I could ask you that because when I think of the Exorcist, I always think about Linda Blair. I was 16 years old when I saw it in cinema here in Munich. And I didn't know the Munich actor was in this movie. And he always talked about Linda Blair getting electroshocks to push up. And so, because you...
Oh, are you asking me if this is correct?
No, if you think about the Navajos and the damage that the movie to the Navajos, and I thought maybe this did a lot of damage to Linda Blair to be in this movie. What do you think about that?
No, there's a lot of urban legends about that film. Linda Blair had a pretty wonderful experience. She's still going to conventions, and she was fed a lot of milkshakes. She loved milkshakes on the film. No, there's a lot of urban legends about it. I don't believe for 1 minute she was mistreated on the film. Yeah. Ellen Burstyn, it's a little bit of a different story. Billy was a bit, that scene where she's gets thrown on the floor screaming. She hurt her back, but that was Friedkin being a little bit extreme in his directing. So, in fact, he does talk about this on in Leap of Faith. Some of the techniques that he used as a director back in the day that you could not in a million years use today. I mean, just shooting guns on set to startle the actors, or do things like this today would not be possible. So, but that's he's still part of the old Hollywood that it's kind of it's a thing of the past for sure. But as far as I know, and again, I from everything that I've observed, and I met Linda Blair, and there was no abuse on the set.
Is there another question? I think we could take one more in the audience. Last chance. I do have one more.
Right. Okay.
Because obviously we were talking a lot about film history and your approach to film history and your enthusiasm and your geekiness and our geekiness. You were on the Cinevision jury. How was your experience? Because that's more a little bit, not necessarily film history, but the future of film.
Sure.
Were you startled? Were you surprised? What was the experience without telling us who the winner is just yet?
Now, are you talking about, was I surprised or startled by the films or by the jury?
By the films.
By the films.
By the jury, maybe
we have
as
to be
well.
Clear. Oh, they're very startling. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I mean, you know, there. Obviously, I'm not going to name, titles, but there were some really strong films. I think we generally gravitated towards a couple of titles. I had a couple of disagreements on some titles as well, but I'm very happy with the decisions we've made. Very comfortable. I think it's a real reflection of our jury and how it works. So,
because I feel like we talk about it so much that cinema is dying, and it's not. But the future of cinema is still there, and seeing young talents coming up with new approaches to film is just super interesting. So I was just wondering, like, by the titles that you saw, 10 of them, like, where are we headed?
I wish I could tell you. Because I tend to look back to the past.
Exactly.
And the thing about like if we could predict what the next Psycho is going to be, what the next Alien is going to be, what is that next sort of cultural moment? I think it's going to come out of the blue, when we least expect it to. So I don't know. I think cinema is not remotely dead. I think it's accelerating. I am concerned, certainly about the streamers. Of course, I have films, on their platforms, but I think as long as it doesn't negate the theatrical experience, I think that's really important. And I think, distribution is just a frustrating process, because I think many times the visionary films, the great films that exist, that come out, sometimes don't even get distribution. You see them at film festivals, and then you never see them again. And that's a problem. And I think there's always this assumption from buyers that this is too niche, or this is too art house, or this should not have a theatrical release, and says who? Of course they have an expertise, but I think sometimes audiences are also really quite surprising, and I think audiences like to watch good films, and in fact I do highly recommend, if you're getting a little bit bored of the stuff that you're seeing on all these big streaming platforms, get the Criterion channel. The Criterion channel is...
We can't in Germany.
You cannot?
No.
Oh.
No.
Even with a VPN?
Yes, you can.
Well,
with
there
a
you
VPN.
go. So, you can.
Don't
what it
tell
takes.
anyone, but do what it takes. It is it is amazing, and it is,
it's the best.
Film history, but also contemporary film, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's fully curated. And that's the problem that I have with a lot of the platforms, is that I think they just throw stuff at the wall to see what's going to stick. And then you're scrolling and you're seeing, of course, they all have great movies, but then you don't really know what to watch. Mm-hmm. And it's this sort of like mass of stuff, of content, that doesn't really sort of make sense. So, Criterion really curates everything. And if you care about film, and if you want to watch good films, that's the thing, is there will never be enough time in all of our lifetimes to watch all the great films that have been made. It's not even close. Like, you're not even scratching the surface. So why would you waste... And I'm not suggesting we shouldn't watch stuff to just unplug or whatever, but when I say watch a great film, I'm not necessarily saying an intellectual film or an art house film. There's some great watch, Beavis and Butthead Do America is actually a really good movie. It's really well written, Like, so there's all kinds of stuff. I just have a problem with, with the fact that there's so much stuff that is poorly executed. And when there's only such a limited amount of time to watch good stuff, let's at least go there as much as we can,
Alexander, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're about to watch another great movie, The Taking.
Thank you.
In about half an hour, so get yourselves a drink outside, have a little break, and we will be seeing you in half an hour.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.